And once more, dear friends, we are going into the breach. Oh, you're Catholic? Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe. You acted like an American, okay? Now, there's a number of different things that have to be done in this country to change the culture, which will in turn change the politics.
And the culture's a swamp. Because that is not a Catholic teaching.
Right.
And the cafeteria is closed, my friend.
Yeah. Joe Pasillo, joined as always by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear friends, we are going into the breach. He tells the truth, just like we do at the front line with Joe and Joe on Sunday nights, 8 o'clock, Facebook Live. We got a great show for you tonight because, as we always say, the left is teeing it up for us, and we're Barry Bonds standing at home plate, ready to knock their lies right into San Francisco Bay. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo is always joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear friends, we are going into the breach, and you're listening to us on the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. And our live chat room, the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, online at crusadechannel.com/chat. So we welcome you all to the show today, and we are very, very honored to be joined once again by a friend of the program, Jesse Romero. Okay, and we're going to be talking all things Donald Trump. And I know I got it here somewhere. We're going to be talking about the Catholic vote for Trump. Okay, and Jesse's got a lot of good reasons why we should do so. Jesse does not need an introduction, but either way, I'm going to give just a little brief background. He's had vast experiences with non-Catholics, fallen away Catholics. He's become proficient how to speak the truth to people. Joe and I like to call Jesse a modern-day St. Paul. I'm sure we're not the only ones who have said that about him. And like I said, he's the author of a new book that we think every Catholic and every person of goodwill should read, A Catholic Vote for Trump, the only choice in 2020 for Republicans, Democrats, independents alike. And he co-authored the book with John McCullough. And so, Jesse, we want to welcome you to the show. One thing I will say before handing it over to Joe Resinello, what I love about the book, Jesse, more than anything else, and I took it down in no time. Book's over about 220 pages. Took it down in no time. It's very well written, very accessible, very easy to read. Joe and I always say on the show that it was just enough for us to vote for Donald Trump because of judges. And we'll get into that, okay? But you and John, you laid out a much deeper case. That's why your book is appropriately titled, where you're going after Democrats and independents too. It's a much deeper case of voting for Trump. And we're going to get into a whole bunch of questions on that. But I'm going to hand it over to Joe Resinello, and we'll go from there.
As we start all things, we're going to start with a prayer, because all good things start with a prayer, and this is a good thing. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. With thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Jess, as Joe said, the book is very accessible, and like your radio program with Terry out in California and the program that Joe and I basically have both on Facebook, Holy Faith Media, and the Crusade Channel, our audience, they're blue-collar men. Christ was a blue-collar man. His disciples were blue-collared men. That is the audience, and I love the fact that your book is geared towards it. If you were going to summarize the book in one sentence, what would you say to somebody who was going to read it?
I would say that the summary of the book is that I think we make the case that President Trump is the most pro-life. He's the most pro-religious liberty. He's the most Catholic-friendly president in my lifetime. And he's a friend. He's a friend of the little guy, what Hillary Clinton calls the deplorables, or what Donald Trump calls the forgotten man, what I call the Joe Six-Pack in the pew, or Joe, John Q. Catholic. Donald Trump he's for the Main Street guy, not the Wall Street guy. And from a Catholic perspective, he's the most Catholic-friendly president we've ever had in our lifetime. In fact, Father Pavone endorsed the book. His endorsement is phenomenal. And there's a line that Father Pavone uses. He says, if President Trump is not where he's at, we Catholics would not be where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's spot on. I mean, a lot of people have commented on this, a lot of Catholic voices, a lot of Christian voices. Why is it unique, Jesse? I mean, like, why is this particular vote unique? And what's our target audience? I mean, are we going after, basically the Catholics in the pews, the independents? Are we going after Democrats who are potentially going to turn to Trump into 2020? Who's our target audience?
Well, according to people that have studied this fairly well, they're saying that the Catholic vote is basically the tipping point for the elections. And they're saying, for example, I'm reading here that the last election that we had, they're always looking at the Catholic vote basically to see who's going to get elected. And so this is why it's important for us as Catholics to make sure, if the Catholic vote is that important, which it is, then we have to, again, put all our eggs in this basket, because once again, as Father Pavone said, he found himself in litigation for 8 years under the Obama administration. He was from one court into another court, and he said that when President Trump became president, President Trump told him, don't worry. He says, do your work. You'll never be prosecuted by my administration, nor will the Little Sisters of the Poor. President Trump is not going to enforce the Johnson Amendment that was written back in 1954 and is enforced by the Clintons and is enforced by Barack Obama's administration to basically stifle Catholics. And so, again, this is why I think the election of this president is very important, because, again, as Catholics, our goal is to evangelize the country, but we need the government to stay out of our way. This president is based on his judicial appointments, which is another topic. Mm-hmm. He's making the atmosphere Catholic friendly so that we can have religious liberty and we can go and do our thing, which is called evangelization.
I mean, Jesse, I want to just throw something out there to you that I don't know if you've thought about it already, but if you remember during the during the Democrat debates, right? And I think this is very important. There are 22 million voters out there that are self-described Democrats for life. Okay, and it's an organization. It's headed by a woman named Kristen Day. Kristen Day asked Pete Buttigieg straight up, brother. She said, will you do anything about the platform in terms of abortion that's going to be more inclusive of our group, the Democrats for Life? Now, in a nutshell, he told her, kick rocks. Okay? That's not obviously the way he put it. He was more politic about it, but he told her to beat it. Okay? Those people, Jesse, they need to read your book. They need to read your book, because what they are is they're pro-life, but they're still reluctant to vote for a Republican, if you know what I mean. And Trump is not your dyed-in-the-wool, cookie-cutter Republican. In fact, I looked at your appendix in your book. Your appendix alone is worth reading the book for. To look at all the things. I'm reading it saying, if I was a Democrat, I could vote for this guy. If I'm a pro-life Democrat, I could vote for this guy. When you talk about criminal justice reform and all these things. I would, and how much of a shame it would be, or it would be great for us to see the Democrats squirm over the fact that they lost millions of voters, that they basically said, there's the door. You don't have there's no place for you in our party. So I wanted to throw that in there, that is the group that I think should be reading your book in spades.
Here's the fact that the reason President Trump won in 2016 is because he won a majority of the Catholic vote. President Trump in 2016 received 52.4% of the Catholic vote in 2016, compared to Mitt Romney, who just got 43% of the Catholic vote when he ran for president back in 2012. So, again, this is why my partner John and myself wrote the book. Whether President Trump wins re-election or loses, will depend on which way Catholics vote in 2020. And again, people know both sides of the aisle that the Catholic vote is always the swing vote in national elections. And that's again, that's why the majority of Catholics, the way we vote is what decides the results of national elections. 2020 is very important.
Oh, I would agree. I think what a lot of people question, and this is something you touched on in the book, is does Donald Trump have genuine love for the American people? I mean, we all have seen him. He's been in the spotlight for 3 decades. Playboy from New York City, billionaire, lives a very lavish lifestyle. Many people question the fact that he does love the common man. One, do you believe that? And two, could you kind of opine on that for a little bit? Because I think that's very important.
It's funny when liberals say that Trump doesn't love people, he's just in it for himself. It's funny. Aren't liberals the one that say, who are you to judge? I mean, that's their famous line, right? Who are you to judge? But be that as it may, Trump loves people and the people love him. I can tell you this, just look at the enormous amounts of people that come out to his conferences versus Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton that can't even fill up a high school basketball gym. Trump loves people. The people love him. The Main Street, the blue collar guy, the little guy, the small business owner, Joe Six-Pack in the pew. This is middle America, and their instincts are better than the elites. They recognize authenticity, and they look at Trump not as right versus left. They look at Trump as a pragmatist. I see a problem, I fix it. I can't be bought out by these big corporations because I'm a self-made billionaire. I don't need people's money. Both sides of the aisle have always been pulled in one direction or another because they have to again respond and pay off their favors to the people that put them in office. But when you go to Catholic teaching and look at the term love, so what is love according to Catholic teaching? Love is this. Catechism of Catholic Church, St. Thomas Aquinas says this. Love is desiring and willing what's best for another person. Okay, so let's look at that. President Trump, the successful businessman, when he sees hungry people 4 years ago when he became president, he doesn't want to throw people fish. He doesn't want to increase the welfare rolls. What does he want to do? He wants to teach poor people how to fish. That's why he had the best economy in 60 years that benefited Latinos and blacks and women, because he's not about expanding the welfare rolls, okay? So you can be, again, part of the plantation to the government, enslaved to the plantation. No, he's teaching people how to fish. That's love. And the fact is, I don't know how many people work for free. Anybody that questions that if he loves his country, I would just ask them, do you work for free? Well, guess what? This man works for free. He doesn't take a salary. And in fact, his present salary right now is earmarked to combat the coronavirus. And so, and the guy doesn't work 8 hours a day. Who is going to volunteer 10 to 15 hours a day for free if they don't love what they're doing? I mean, yeah.
And to be attacked so viciously while doing it, to open himself up and his family up to all the lies and vicious attacks. Look, Jesse, we know the left is vicious. Okay, we know we know that they play in the gutter. Okay, so to do it for free, to do the job for free, but then to do it in great difficulty because of the constant barrage and the constant attacks on him and his family. Now, this would bring us to another point. Another question that we want to ask. So one of the criticisms you hear, okay, of Trump is that, well, he gives nicknames to people. He belittles people. He's a little too harsh. He tweets too much, okay, and all that nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Because as we just said, there's nobody more vicious than the left. No. What's your take on Trump and when it comes to these different things like calling Sleepy Joe Biden and let's say things like that?
Okay, I'll be honest with you. I actually enjoy it. I'll tell you what, for me personally, it's a breath of fresh air because as I look at all the other feckless Republicans that have run this country, they stay there and get insulted and berated and don't even defend their family or their children. And frankly, it's, to me, I'm kind of enjoying this. I'm kind of saying like, wow, for the first time, somebody's pushing back. That's a Republican conservative. Somebody's actually counterpunching. And I'll tell you, I mean, can you blame him for his outbursts, for his tweets? I mean, the guy, just like you said, is insulted 7 days a week, 24 hours a day by the mainstream media. His family's insulted. His kids are insulted. His wife is insulted. And you're wondering why he has these occasional outbursts? Are you kidding me? I mean, and the fact of the matter is, I'm not some purist. I'm a realist. I'm a retired LA cop. I was in police locker rooms for 25 years. I boxed for 10 years, did full contact karate. I was in those gyms, boxing gyms and kickboxing gyms for 20 years of my life. I'm not offended by locker room talk. That's not church. That's not the way I talk, but I get it. Not everybody was raised the way I was raised. And the fact of the matter is, I think we have more important things to worry about than President Trump's language. We have this encroaching, movement in this country towards socialism by the Democrats. And so my question is, do you want a president who speaks politically correct and does great evil and with his executive orders and policies like Obama, or do you want a president who speaks politically incorrect, but his executive orders and policies have given us the greatest economy in 60 years? And one more point I'm going to make, talking about, look at his speech. It's funny. These liberals don't seem to have a problem, when they hear this type of bombastic, filthy, venomous speech all day long on MSNBC, on CNN, Bill Maher, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, the ladies on The View. You don't hear any complaints by the Democrats. All you hear is crickets. And so, again, I'm not worried so much about what somebody says. I'm worried about what they do, and what he's done has benefited every American, not only Catholics, more than any other president in my 58 years on planet Earth.
Jesse, in the book, you noted the Hillary Clinton email scandal. I have to ask why, because clearly he's not running against her. Why was that a significant point to note in the book?
Okay, there's only one reason why we even brought this up, is because we wanted to, my partner John and myself, we wanted to let people know what President Trump inherited. That's it. He inherited a nightmare. He inherited a swamp. And so we put a chapter there just to let people know when Donald Trump says, I've got to drain the swamp, we're talking about the Clinton machine. We're talking about the Obama machine. And we're talking about all their incestuous relationships around the world with dictators, with communists, with socialists, with Islamists. And the fact is, we just wanted to remind people in the book, once again, what he stepped into, okay? Because I maintain that the Obama and the Clinton administration was the most corrupt administration in American history. And so that's why, especially my partner, John McCullough, he's kind of one of those policy wonks. He says, we've got to insert this in the book just because we've got to allow people, we've got to demonstrate to people and highlight the importance of why we need Donald Trump for a second term. Because again, I mean, when you just look at the two forms of justices in this country, one form of justice for liberal elites like the Clintons, and then another form of justice for conservatives, that's why we put this in there, because we wanted to show the double standard, that you have in this country with the limousine liberals and the other standard for conservatives. I'm a retired LA cop. I remember in my academy training, right on every book that we studied, it had Lady Justice with a blindfold. And what does that mean? It means that justice is blind. Well, it's very sad to see that when it comes to liberals or progressives, these swamp politicians, they seem to be exempt. And that's why I think we need Donald Trump for a second term, because I think we're going to learn much more about how corrupt our government has become.
And I think Attorney General Barr is going to push that point, Jesse. I think we got a good guy. Well, Roman Catholic, and that guy is a pit bull. Knows, and I think he's gonna do just that. And by the way, just as an example, another example of what you're talking about justice not being so blind when it comes to the left. Just something that's in the news right now. Just look at the difference in attitude between Brett Kavanaugh and his accusation and Joe Biden and the accusations against him. Kavanaugh deserved no due process. I believe her, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, those very same people, not people like them, those very same people are saying, well, no, Joe, we do have a presumption of innocence in this country. Not when it came to Brett Kavanaugh, you didn't. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. So, Joe, what did you have?
Basically, Jess, you talked about draining the swamp. This was one of his slogans. Has he been successful thus far?
Well, again, I think it's impossible to drain the swamp. The Clinton-Obama swamp, they've been around for, I don't know how many, decades. And the swamp, I believe they're the progressives from both parties, because there's swamp creatures in the Republican Party as well. Okay. There just happens to be more in the Democrat Party, but the swamp is a uniparty. Okay. And the swamp creatures from both parties, they've wreaked havoc in the Middle East and beyond with their disastrous records on foreign policy, and they've played on our patriotism. The swamp's been ripping off Americans by getting us into foolish wars that help who? Helps radical Islam, spying on Americans. President Trump has put the swamp on notice. Basically, when he came to office, he looked at them and said, the emperor has no clothes. I'm calling you guys out. And he's calling up the establishment, who, again, it's a uniparty. It's from both parties. Just happens to be more in the Democrats. The establishment is criminal. They're corrupt and incompetent. And President Trump, as I see it, when he came into office, his message, he's telling the swamp, hey, this ends now. And in fact, I think one of the things that he did that just put them on notice and shocked them was a speech in 2016. If you listen to that speech that he gave in 2016, it was incredible. Here's like 2 or 3 sentences. He says, quote, I want the entire corrupt Washington establishment to hear and to heed these words I'm about to say. When we win on November 8th, we're going to Washington, D.C., and we're going to drain the swamp. Okay? Now, when he said this, I can tell you this, he turned the entire Washington, D.C. establishment against him, which includes 90% of the media, 90% of our universities, 90% of Hollywood actors. And he took on a fight that no other president would have ever undertaken in their lifetime. None. Everybody's run away from this fight. And I'll tell you, the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us that the devil, he sticks his tail into politics. In paragraph 408 of the Catechism, here's what it says. For people that are saying, hey, religion and politics, they don't. Are you kidding me? The devil goes after politicians specifically and political parties. Here's what the Catechism says. The devil has acquired a certain domination over man, even though man remains free. Man has a wounded nature inclined to evil, which gives rise to serious errors in the areas of education and politics. Paragraph 408. So the Catechism says that the devil preys on our fallen nature to affect what? Education and politics. And so to drain the swamp, it's a phrase that means to clean up the corruption of interest groups who buy access to politicians with money. And it also means to rid our waste of the corruption and all that insider dealing, just like Biden had with China and all the benefits he had that he's given to his sons. And again, it also means clean up some of the government that are part of the deep state, like we just found out recently with the FBI. And so he needs another 4 years to continue draining the swamp, because this is a tall order.
We were talking on the other side of the break about Trump's indifference to homosexuality. I mean, clearly as Catholics, that's an intrinsic evil. This is something that, a good Catholic cannot vote for. Now, he is uncommitted on his position, but even the fact that he is indifferent, should we be concerned with that, Jess?
Well, I would say I'm not a Trump apologist, but here are the facts. Let's just be honest. Most of our cardinals and bishops and priests in the Catholic Church, they also dissent from this teaching as well. Okay? And or at least they're silent about it. So when it comes to Trump, let's remember, he wasn't formed by the Catholic faith. We're not talking about a practicing Catholic. President Trump, he's a Protestant Presbyterian that just came back to his faith. So I'm not going to hold him to the level that I'm going to hold a bishop or a priest to uphold the teachings of Christ. When I voted for Donald Trump, I didn't vote for a pastor. I already got a pastor. His name's the Lord Jesus Christ. John chapter 10, verse 11. I already got a pastor. I voted for a president. And I'm not a purist. I'm a realist. And the fact is, he was not formed by the Catholic faith. He's a Protestant. He's not even a minister. And so I think that he looks at the Supreme Court decision, Obergefell versus Hodges, on homosexual marriage, much like, I don't know, Bishop Barron said the same thing in an interview on the Dave Rubin show. He was asked about it, and Bishop Barron said, well, it's settled law. We don't need to, lobby against it. I think now, Bishop Barron, to me, I'm going to hold him to a higher standard. He's the successor of the apostle. So I expect more from him. His response definitely telegraphed weakness on the issue, because I think Bishop Barron grossly underestimates the degree to which same-sex marriage is being used as a Trojan horse to undermine fundamental rights and the freedoms of Christians. But I'm not going to hold President Trump to Catholic moral standards. Remember, he's the president for all people. But I will say a few things about him, okay? Most people don't realize that the LGBT lobby is very angry with Trump. You know why? Because he doesn't light up the White House with rainbow lights during the month of June, like Barack Obama did. During the month of June, Barack Obama lit up the White House with the rainbow lights, for the entire month of June, every single evening. President Trump doesn't do that. Okay, he says, I'm not going to get involved in these issues and stuff, and I'm not going to take issues on such a hot button issue. So the fact of the matter is, I have no doubt that if you would have a personal conversation with President Donald Trump over some coffee and breakfast at Denny's, I'm sure he would sound like you and me on the issue of homosexual marriage and sodomy. I have no doubt. But again, he's the president for all the country, and he has to pick his battles. He has to pick his battles, and he figures that there's bigger fish to fry. So what's he doing? This is the way he's flanking the enemy by reshaping the judiciary and putting justices that are strict constitutionalists and conservative and people of faith. This is the only way we're going to overturn Obergefell versus Hodges, which was, passed by a rogue liberal evolving constitutional justices, and Roe versus Wade. We're only going to be able to do this by changing the courts. And that's exactly what President Trump is trying to do by his conservative appointments. Now, we can't expect President Trump to erase something that's already the last 20 years of a culture of death, a debased culture. We can't expect him to do this overnight. And here's another thing, by the way, that most people don't realize. Joe Biden just came out the other day. He's on record saying that if he becomes president, he says he's going to reinstate the transgender military policy that President Trump killed.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, President Trump's decision to bar transgender confused people from presenting themselves as members of the opposite sex in the military, Biden says, I'm going to overturn that because that's discriminatory and detrimental to our national security. So I would say that he's handling it the right way. He's flanking, coming around the backside, if you will, by stacking the courts with conservatives, faith-filled justices that do not believe that the Constitution evolves and changes with every generation.
I think that's a very important point. It begs the question, too, what you mentioned about Joe Biden, just how far left is he going to go? And, is he ever in the general election going to be able to move back as they traditionally try to do towards the middle? He just seems to be so extreme. And I'm glad you brought up the other thing, too, because Joe, a recurring theme on our show, Jesse, at the front line with Joe and Joe, is the Marxist cultural agenda. There's not a president, a senator, a governor, a member of the House that's going to stop that. Judges are going to stop that. When you sue a public school district because they want to teach your 5-year-old boy that he could be a girl, okay, or when they want to teach your 8-year-old daughter about anal sex, of let's say, at least on that issue, as far as I'm concerned, and Joe, I know, agrees, as far as Obergefell, Trump could do nothing about Obergefell, but the judges can.
Let me make one comment. Also, if people remember, Joe Biden, he brags about, he says, the great contribution that I gave in 8 years with President Barack Obama, he's the one that brags about pushing homosexual marriage in this country. Joe Biden says, it was me. He goes, I take credit for this. It was my brainchild. I convinced Barack Obama. And so I just say that just to let you know, because President Trump just talked to the bishops, the articles in LifeSite News. I mean, it's very simple. If Biden comes in office, we are going to lose, in football, we're going to lose yardage. We're going to get thrown back for 50 to 75-yard loss. And I'm talking about religious liberty, but I'm using a football analogy. Whenever we have a Republican, and especially Donald Trump, boy, we've been making gains, 5 yards, 10 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards. There's incremental gains. But if Biden comes into office, boy, oh boy, are we going to be thrown back for a loss, and we won't be able to recover from this for the next 30 years.
Oh, I agree. There's a definite threat there, and the sin of it all is Joe Biden is a baptized Catholic. That's a conversation for a different day. But I want to switch gears a little bit, Jess, and go towards the media. I mean, they oppose this man like I have never seen a human being be opposed publicly. I mean, why does he deserve this wrath? I mean, I have my own opinions. I think it is about abortion. I think this election is about abortion. I've said that from the very beginning. I'd be interested in your opinion, though.
Abortion is the holy grail. It's the golden calf of the left. It's sacrosanct to them. And they see that if this man gets another 4 years, he could appoint 2, maybe 3 more justices. This would change the tenor of the country because he's appointing people of faith and people that have a strict constitutional view of the document. I also believe that the reason that the mainstream media goes after him is because at this point, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. The mainstream media is basically the mouthpiece of the Democrat Party right now. Okay? That's just the way it is. And I can back this up. There's a study that was done by UCLA and University of Southern California, Los Angeles, which is no bastion of conservative thought. It's a typical state, liberal college. Their political science department, they put out a study and they said of the 20 major media outlets in the United States, 18 are left of center. Only 2 ticked right of center. And so this is the weapon that the Democrats have been using against us. It's just the fact of the matter is that 95% of the media is a shill or a mouthpiece for the Democrat Party. And again, I think this is probably the most powerful weapon that was deployed by the Clintons. It was this corporate media alliance, and that's what they're using against all of us. And that's why it's important for shows like this and Crusade Channel and Church Militant and Virgin Most Powerful and Taylor Moore. It's important for the little guys to get out there that are not beholden to big corporate dollars, or even to the USCCB. We have to, as Catholics, we're baptized Catholics. We can't be the mouthpiece for people. We have to say, we're soldiers of Jesus Christ. We're disciples of Christ. This is what the Holy Mother Church teaches, and this is what we believe. I'm going to tell you, the media has gone so far off the rails that when I look at the catechism, the catechism tells us how the media should comport. It's in 2494 of the catechism. It says this: the information provided by the media is at the service of the common good. Society has the right to information based on truth, freedom, justice, and solidarity. Close quote. So let's be clear about one thing. The corporate media in our country, they're no longer involved in journalism. They're basically the what I would call the fifth wheel. They're a special interest group. They're like any lobbyist, and they got a total political agenda, and that agenda is not for the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's for themselves. And anybody who challenges their control, they start demonizing you. They use a technique that was used very effectively by Joseph Goebbels, who basically worked for Adolf Hitler. Joseph Goebbels, who was the Secretary of Propaganda, he says, if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. And so that's exactly what we see the media doing. And especially in Spanish, it's a lot worse in Spanish because, at least in English, we have some alternative media that is conservative. Very few outlets. And then thanks be to God, we have a lot of people like yourselves, myself, a lot of podcasters that are putting out Catholic truth, which is huge. But in Spanish, they have essentially the equivalent of MSNBC, CNN, and Bill Maher as their only outlets.
Jesse,
Right.
you brought up a very important point, because I know your book is being translated into Spanish, and I think that's vital. For those who don't know, Jesse is a proud Mexican American. He served the Mexican American population in LA as a sheriff's officer. How do you convince? Because I grew up with a lot of Cuban guys. A lot of Cubans tend to be conservative, but sadly, some of my friends, after they went to liberal colleges, have flipped. And I have a difficult time trying to convince them that Trump's immigration policy is something that's good. How do you convince your fellow Hispanics, both inside and outside the church, that his immigration policy is right for America? And also, what is that policy for people who may not know?
I believe that President Trump's immigration policy is completely in line with Catholic teaching. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, anybody who comes from Central or South America, they're coming because they want a better life. They don't want a worse life. They want a better life. Many of them are fleeing socialist countries, Latin American dictators, Latin American strongmen, entirely corrupt governments run by oligarchies. So they're coming here to the U.S. to find a better life. And I'll tell you, all the people that I've met in the Southwest of Mexican descent, every single one of them wants secure borders. So when I hear people saying that Hispanics want open borders, well, not the Hispanics that I meet or that I'm talking to all the time. Now, here's what the Catechism says about immigration, and President Trump is following this to the very letter. It's in 2241 of the Catechism. Very short. Here's what it says. The more prosperous nations, that would be us, the U.S., are obliged to the extent they're able. That's a key phrase. To the extent they're able. I'll come back to that. to welcome the foreigner in search of the security and the means of livelihood which he cannot find in his country of origin. Public authorities should see to it that the natural right is respected that places a guest under the protection of those who receive him. Political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions, especially with regard to the immigrant's duties towards that country of adoption. Second point there, that the immigrant is what? Subject to various juridical conditions obliged with regard to the immigrant's duties toward the country of adoption. Third point, immigrants are obliged to respect with gratitude the material and spiritual heritage of the country that receives them, to obey its laws, and to assist in carrying civic burdens. So that's 2241. Here's the three things that I'm going to highlight that President Trump is following. Number one, notice the first thing it says that, prosperous countries are obliged to the extent that they're able. What does that mean? It means that a nation, common sense tells you, no nation can absorb an unlimited number of immigrants. Okay? There's a limit to the number of people that a nation can absorb. Okay? It's like, say you got a nice big house and you got a bunch of homeless people knocking at your door. You're saying, well, I got 3 empty rooms. My kids are out of the house. I can take 3 people, but I can't take 30 people or 50. I don't have the room. Okay? The second thing that the Catechism talks about, or the second qualifier, is that the state or the country has the legal right to set legal requirements or juridical conditions that must be met for immigration. So in other words, who makes immigration policy? The U.S. bishops or the government? The government does. That's what the Catechism says. Okay? The third thing that 2241 says is that the immigrants, whether legal or illegal, have a duty to what? To respect the laws to which they are immigrating to. Okay? Now, this even applies if you're illegal. You're supposed to, as a Catholic, respect the laws to which you're immigrating to. So if you've broken the laws, if you're an immigrant, you're morally bound to respect the laws and be prosecuted by the laws of that country. And the fact of the matter is, it upsets me when I hear Catholics talk about this issue, and it doesn't serve anybody well when you omit paragraph 2241 of the Catechism, and when you just talk about, we've got to be generous and kind and have mercy. No. Let's stick to what the Catechism says. It's right there. And when I hear a lot of our leaders talking about immigration, I'm waiting. I'm pissing. It says, okay, the bishop's going to quote 2241. And I'm waiting, and nothing. They're talking about, we've got to be kind. We got to be merciful. Please, Your Eminence, Your Excellency, can you quote the actual documents of the church on immigration? And furthermore, if you look at St. Thomas Aquinas, in my book, I have a section on St. Thomas Aquinas on immigration. Boy, oh boy, if St. Thomas Aquinas, the angelic doctor, was alive right now, President Trump would hire him as his immigration, because what St. Thomas said in the 13th century is precisely the steps that President Trump is taking today.
You mentioned something that I think is very true. I mean, a lot of people look at it, because I grew up with like I said, I grew up with a good amount of Latino guys in high school. People say, they're looking for handouts. No, they're not. They want a level playing field. They're some of the hardest working people I have ever met in my entire life. Some of the best people I've also met in my entire life. But sadly, like a lot of Italians, like a lot of Irish who come here, there's sort of like this stigma that that's ingrained in their head that the Democratic Party is their party. It's the party of the poor. It's the party of the working man. Sadly, the Hispanic population has been duped by the Democratic Party. Could you talk a little bit about that, Jesse? Because frankly, I actually think they're more conservative than they realize.
Latinos are social conservatives when you talk to them, but they just haven't been taught how to vote, or they haven't been taught the difference between both parties. The best thing that I do with Hispanic Catholics, or just any Catholic, I say, go to Priest for Life, and Father Frank Pavone, what he's done masterfully is he's put the Democrat Party platform, the major issues, side by side with the Republican Party platform issues. And then on the middle column, he'll have the issues: abortion, immigration, euthanasia, Medicare, whatever, down the middle. You can read for yourself side by side, because Father Pavone has done all the homework, and it's in Spanish, by the way, as well, this side-by-side comparison between both parties. And in the middle, you have Catholic teachings, and you're going to see which party more reflects, or most reflects, Catholic social teaching. By far, it's the Republican Party. In fact, on all the issues that the Catholic Church calls intrinsically evil, they line up with the Republican Party. And in all those issues that the Catechism and the Church calls intrinsically evil, the Democrats are on the opposite side of the fence of the Catholic Church on moral teaching. And so here's something else that I did on another book that I wrote. It's called Knocked Off the Donkey. I wrote that one about 3 years ago. I went to the Church of Satan, Detroit, Michigan. I went to their website because they're very political. They're always making political statements. So I was kind of wondering if the satanic set of Satan in Detroit, Michigan, I was wondering if they had kind of like a political position. They do. I went to their website. So as I'm reading the Church of Satan, or it was called the Temple of Set, which is, I think, Michael Aquino started that Satanist. And I'm looking at their issues. It says, we are pro-abortion. We support Planned Parenthood. We are for euthanasia. We are for medical recreational marijuana. I'm going down the line of the Satanic Temple in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm saying, Chihuahua, as they say in Spanish. I said, these guys here, they line up exactly with the Democrat
Party.
Chihuahua.
Jesse, let's leave it there for 1 second. We got to take a break. Can you hang out with us, Jesse, one more segment? Would that be okay? All right. So you're listening to The Front Line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We're way into the breach with Jesse Romero, talking about a Catholic vote for Trump, and everybody's got to go out and go and buy his book, because it gets much more in depth than we're talking about right here. So you're listening to us on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. And our live chat room, the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. So stick around. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Don't worry about the hiccups. They'll edit it. It'll be all right. We're getting
So when you send it to, I'm going to call Justin in the morning, okay, and let him know he's got to clean it up in the middle, and we have to let Jonathan know the same thing, and we have to be with Justin, we won't have to be, because it's going on the Crusade Channel. But with Jonathan, he's got to get into do some editing on this.
He'll be able to.
Too many pauses. All right, so we got one more 25-minute segment, and we'll pick it up right now. Welcome back, everyone, to The Front Line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And thank you very much for joining us way in the breach today with Jesse Romero. And we're talking about a Catholic vote for Trump here on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Our live chat room, the only social media out there worth actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. So we ended the last segment, and Jesse was making a good point about the satanic cult up in Detroit seems to have takes the same political positions. as the Democratic Party, which is not, it's not shocking when you talk about, the party of death. I did want to mention one thing to you, Jesse, because we're gonna talk a little bit more about the Latino vote, and we were getting into it in the last segment. Joe and I are of the opinion that if Hispanic Catholics, like you said, were more educated, I'm not saying that they're not smart, I'm just saying they lack information. If they knew what that party stood for, you know who would be the first people to start talking about closing the borders and keeping them out? Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire left would say, let's close those borders because we can't have all those Hispanic Catholics coming in here being pro-life and against gay marriage. You know that that's the truth.
They're also the only group of people, sadly, who are having children in this country. It's not the third, fourth generation Americans. If they have 2 children, we're lucky. It's the Hispanic population. A guy working construction on my house, working for a guy, I'm talking to him. He's the laborer. He's from Guatemala. The man's got 5 kids. Works hard. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather give him the darn money. Not for nothing. Like, these are the people who are working and having children. And like you said, I think they're more conservative than they actually think. I think they've been brainwashed, like many Italians that have been here who are union workers, many Irish people who work on the railroad in New York City. It's a shame. But Jesse,
Joe, you know how many Italians that I grew up with, older guys that I had to hear when I used to be a Teamster back in the day, when I was in trucking, when I was in my 20s? You know how many times I heard, I'm never voting Republican, never voting Republican, never voting Republican. I heard it all my life. All my life. So you can't blame other people, but that's why that's why what Jesse's doing is so important with his book, A Catholic Vote for Trump, because we have to raise the consciousness of people, say, this ain't granddaddy's party anymore. Anyway, Joe, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No,
go ahead.
It's okay. I had 2 more questions on that. This one is something you've noted on your radio show, Jesse, and it really made me think. You talked about how when some Hispanics come here illegally, the life that they get is not what they think they're going to get. They leave their family behind. They live in sometimes like dormitory style living, which is involving drinking. The work that they get, it's not the type of high paying job with regard to the expenses that they're going to meet in LA. And what you basically said, it's better to tough it out with your family. Because at least you're the protector of your family. You're the man of the family. And it made me think, like, a lot of times people think, like, coming here, they're going to sneak here, do this. But what they're going to get, this is a hard life. It's a hard life for people who are citizens. And frankly, you wind up losing your family, and you could very easily lose your soul in the process. Could you talk a little bit about that? It made me think. I never really thought of it from that perspective.
There's a Catholic principle in basic Catholic philosophy that says you cannot do evil in order to bring about good. That's Philosophy 101 from St. Thomas Aquinas. And so let me apply that principle. You cannot do evil to bring about a greater good, in order to bring about something good. So here's the point that I'm making. If you break the immigration law and cross the border, okay, so in other words, you're leaving your wife and your kids fatherless in their country of origin. You're coming to a new country replete with every temptation known to man so that you can send them back some money and eventually bring them back here after a couple of years. Let's be realistic, okay? After an illegal immigrant in this country pays his rent, utilities, groceries, postage, vehicle, gas, how much money does he actually have to send his family back in South America? So, isn't it better being like Saint Joseph? Isn't it better to remain physically present with your family and grind it out in your country of origin? I mean, isn't that what Father Peyton says? The family that prays together stays together. Yeah, I get it. Families need money to survive, but what's more important? Is it more important to have the father and the husband physically present to teach them virtue, even in conditions of poverty? Because a man's vocation is to lead, protect, and provide for his family spiritually and physically. And so the person leaves Mexico and comes to LA, says, honey, I'm going to send you money and you'll be over here in a year with me. Here's what happens. And I've seen this over and over again. The guy's living in an apartment with about 5 other construction workers, and they work a hard 10, 12-hour shift. They come back to the apartment, a bunch of guys. They're young. They haven't had sexual intimacy in months. They're watching pornography on the computers, on the television. They're drinking beer. They're smoking dope. Within 6 months, they're having an affair with a bar lady. They move in with her. Guess what? The money to Mexico, to Argentina, it stops. Now you got a woman out there with 4 or 5 kids from their man that hasn't written to them in over a year. These kids that now have no father. These kids are now growing up, being discipled by 18th Street, MS-13, Mara Salvatrucha. They're growing up and being mentored by these thugs. They're growing up to be gang members. The woman sometimes even has to sell her body physically for sex because she has no source of income just to make ends meet and pay the rent. I'm going to tell you what's a big problem in the Latino community, and nobody talks about it. Bigamy. Bigamy is a huge problem in the Hispanic community amongst illegal immigrants having a family in the U.S. and a family in South America. This is so common. Just ask any Catholic priest who hears confessions and ministers in a Latino parish. It's the pink elephant in the living room that nobody wants to talk about. But the bishops back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in Mexico, they would write pastoral letters to the Mexican people. Don't go to the U.S. Don't leave your family. You're going to lose your faith. You're going to thrust your family into poverty. You're going to thrust your wife into promiscuity. You're going to fall into mortal sin. Don't go. Stay here. Tough it out. Grind it out. Stay together. That was the common pastoral direction that was given by the Mexican bishops back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
It's good advice, because I'll be honest with you, I say this all the time. I mean, I'm a father of 3. My wife's about to have our 4th child in 4 weeks, so please keep us in your prayers. I want to retire in heaven. I don't care. I'm not looking to retire anywhere but. And who cares? Sometimes life is hard. You know, my grandfather came here at 16. He didn't speak English, worked in a factory in Newark, raised 3 kids in an apartment. My father never had air conditioning. My father never had a house. He rented his whole entire life. You know something? What's more important, a house or heaven? And that's the way I see it. And that's the way I think what you're basically saying. But I think at the bottom line here, the Latino vote is very important. You see all the politicians competing for it. How is that going to play out in this particular election, in your view?
Yeah, Jesse, I'm interested. I want you to break that down for me, because I'm very ignorant on this. Like, break down the numbers a little bit too. How the Latino vote has traditionally voted, and maybe how they're going to vote in this election.
Okay, the Democrat Party has been infiltrating Latino communities for years because they know that the Latino voters are critical. And if we're going to take back our country, we need to take the Catholic vote and the Latino vote very serious. Democrats know that even a 7% increase in Latinos voting for Republicans will stop Democrats from ever winning another presidential election. Just a 7% increase in the Latino votes would stop the Democrats forever. Latinos are the fastest growing group of voters in America. And that's why the Democrats use their race baiting, tactics against the Republicans to try to persuade Latinos to vote for the Democrat Party of death. They just simply demonize them, use Alinsky methods. And that's why I like President Trump, because he's using their tactics against them, and he's the first one ever doing it. And I'll tell you, Latinos are absolutely conservative in their heart. They believe in the sanctity of human life. They believe in equality, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the right to bear arms. They embrace traditional family morals. They want lower taxes. They want economic prosperity. They want school choice and education. They want regulations that stimulate the economy and create jobs. Hispanics are pro-business. There are nearly 3.2 million Latino-owned businesses in America. And the Latino businesses, they support deregulation, tax cuts, limited government. They want lower costs for, healthcare as well. And they want to save Social Security. They want to preserve Medicare and Medicaid. They believe in the social programs that lift people out of poverty and put them back to work. And they also believe in the free market. They believe in personal freedom. They believe in personal responsibility. And they believe in legal immigration. Legal immigration. Bottom line, Latinos are pro-life, pro-business, and social conservatives. They're a natural constituent of the Democrat Party.
You mean the Republican Party, rather? That's okay. I got it. I totally get it.
We knew what you meant, Jesse. But you know what the shame of it is, too, is that a lot of, it seems to me, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of these people that are coming across the border or attempting to illegally, a lot of them are being used. They're being used. They're being manipulated by, let's say, I would like to, Joe and I talked about it before, some, let's call them global elites, open borders types, and it's a shame because, you lack compassion if you say to close the border, but you're such a compassionate person if you're actually using and manipulating these people to try to, let's say, for argument's sake, weaken the United States. And that's the disgusting part about it, is that they're being so used, and the media just keeps portraying Donald Trump as the racist, and Americans who want a secure border, we're all racist. It's terrible the way they do that. It really, really is.
Let me tell you why borders are a good thing. What Trump is trying to do. Now, we're all Catholics here. We're all followers of Christ. Jesus Christ, in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, he says that in heaven is surrounded by walls. That's what Jesus says. The risen Lord Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation says that heaven is surrounded by walls. He says if you want to go into heaven, you've got to go in through these gates. So you can't be jumping the fence to get into heaven illegally. You got to jump you got to go through these gates, Jesus say, and guess what? You're going to be vetted. It's not like, hey, everybody's welcome, come through the gates. No, you have to be vetted. You have to die in a state of grace and friendship with God to go through those narrow gates, which are surrounded by walls. And now Jesus also says in the Bible why heaven has walls. He says to keep the outsiders, the dogs, the sorcerers, the liars, those who teach falsehood, to keep them outside of the New Jerusalem, the city of God. And so if somebody has a problem with walls, you have a problem with the Lord Jesus Christ. Read your Bible. Revelation chapter 22 tells us heaven is surrounded by a big wall, and you can't jump the wall. You got to go through the gates, and those gates are narrow. And here's the last thing I'll mention. I mean, come on, even our church has a big wall. The Vatican has a huge wall around it. It was built like 1,000 years ago. I forget which pope it was. I have it in my book, Knocked Off the Donkey. 1,000 years ago, the Vatican built a very high and thick wall. You know why? It's on the Catholic Encyclopedia. To keep the Muslims out. Oh, I just said something politically incorrect. That's a fact. Because the church was afraid of Islamic invaders during the Crusades. Because they were just attacking, Christian nations and Christian lands. And so the church put walls 1,000 years around Vatican City to keep the Muslim terrorists out. Come on, are you kidding me? Walls are good things. The White House has a big fence, okay? Huge fence around the White House, spikes on top. But here's something interesting that a lot of liberals don't know. So it's got a super sophisticated fence. And if you get through that fence that's got spikes on top, which you never get through, if you do, though, some have gone through, you got the Secret Service there with machine guns and German Shepherds that are going to take care of business. Well, here's something interesting. When President Barack Obama was president, he added a second fence. So now the White House, as of Barack Obama's presidency, he added a second high, security fence around the White House. So for those people that say we don't need to have a fence, Why did Barack Obama, we already had a fence in the White House. We have now a second fence. It is super secure. So the White House has a fence. The Vatican has a big wall. Heaven has a wall. Are you kidding? Walls are good things.
Well, as we all know, the rules apply to us. They don't apply to them. That's usually how it works with the liberal elites. I want to switch gears a little bit, Jess. Is there a Catholic leader that Donald Trump reminds you of? Because, like you said, he isn't Catholic. I do have hopes I have hopes for him, though, to be honest with you, but that's another conversation. Is there a Catholic leader that he reminds you of?
Yeah, in fact, you guys are going to like this because he was from the East Coast. There's a very prominent, famous Catholic bishop by the name of Bishop John Dagger Hughes. They called him Dagger John. He died in 1864. He was the fourth bishop of New York. In the 18th century in New York City, when millions of Irish immigrants were coming in through Ellis Island, John Hughes, who was Irish born, he saw that the Irish were being treated like second-class citizens. He saw the discrimination. And so Bishop John Hughes, he gained notoriety because he's saying, no, not on my watch. This guy was willing to do battle with anyone or any organization who threatened the Catholic Church or Irish people. And John Hughes, he had to overcome a lot of anti-Catholicism, a lot of ignorance back in the 18th century, and he didn't do it very, very diplomatically. They said that this guy was kind of he was a fighter. I mean, people say that this bishop was blunt. He was argumentative. In fact, I've heard him described as more of a Roman gladiator than a devout follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. Bishop John Hughes, he used to write letters to the newspaper, to the editor, defending the Catholic Irish. He even debated Protestants. Can you imagine debating Protestants? The people loved him because they knew that he was for the people. And in fact, here's where he really gained a lot of notoriety. In 1844, when anti-Catholicism was really reaching a pinnacle, there was a bunch of Catholic churches. There was riots in Philadelphia, and 2 Catholic churches were burned down and 12 Catholics died as a result. Well, guess what? Bishop Dagger Hughes, in response to that, he put armed guards around all the Catholic churches in New York. And then Bishop Hughes, he warned the New York mayor. He said, if a single Catholic church is burned down in New York City again, the city of New York is going to be burned down to the ground. Guess what? His threat was taken so seriously that the city leaders, they told the Protestant rioters, stop your rallies. Leave this guy alone. This guy's unstable. And so Bishop Hughes became the most well-known Catholic bishop in the country in the face of this anti-Catholic hostile environment. And he was aggressive, politically incorrect. He was in your face. But in the end, this guy gained the respect, and he brought prestige and honor back to the Catholic Church, especially to Irish Americans. That Donald Trump is our Bishop John Dagger Hughes.
I love it. And you know something? That's what all Catholic men have to do. That's what Joe and I do. That's what you do, Jesse. There's many people out there. We are the church militant. That is also in the catechism of the Catholic Church. You don't hear that anymore. We have to fight. We are right now getting backed up by the culture. And if we don't start standing up, like Donald Trump is standing up, we are in a war. You cannot just stand there and get pummeled, because ultimately, like you said, it's our children, it's our wives, it's our very society that is suffering and will continue to suffer if we don't do it. And Donald Trump is doing that. I mean, and that's frankly why I think they hate him. That's why they hate him, because he punches back. And in many cases, he punches back harder.
Absolutely harder. Joe, we got about we got a little bit over 5 minutes left. Let's end this. Jesse, I would ask you if you would talk to our audience, because let's face it, we talked about a lot of different reasons to vote for Trump, but we started out, we talked about he's the most pro-life president that we've seen, certainly, I believe, in the history of the country, certainly in our lifetimes, okay? There's no question about it. Joe and I are of the opinion that's the real reason why they hate him. Now, aside from judges, please, while we have a few minutes left, tell the pro-life Democrats out there who might watch this video, Jesse, what has he done? Not who has he appointed. What has he actually, in his power, done that we could say are pro-life victories?
All right. Well, let's go right to the heart of the issue. Two things. Father Frank Pavone, as I told you, he was in litigation for 8 years under Barack Obama. Him, the Little Sisters of the Poor, many other Catholic organizations. Guess what? Father Frank Pavone has been left alone for the last 3.5 years to promote Priests for Life because he says the Trump administration will not enforce the Johnson Amendment against any Catholic organization, period. So,
wow.
Number one, that's huge right there. Father Pavone, he says the Obama administration was breaking my piggy bank, fighting one lawsuit after another. He says this president is again, he's a friend of the Catholic Church. And in fact, Father Frank Pavone is one of his advisors, okay? Here, and by the way, Father Frank Pavone is probably the most pro-life priest in the country. He's the founder and the CEO of Priests for Life. He's an advisor to President Trump. If that doesn't say anything, but here's a couple of other things that I would tell you. If you look at his Supreme Court appointments, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, both pro-life conservative constitutionalists, and both of them are men of faith, and both of them are highly qualified jurists. And as important as well, President Trump has appointed over 200 judges to America's lower federal courts, okay? And Priests for Life has reviewed the appointments. Guess what? They're all solid people of faith. They're all solid pro-lifers. President Trump is transforming America's federal courts, and I believe this is going to be his greatest legacy. If President Trump, please God, is reelected in 2020, there's a very good chance he'll have the opportunity to put 2, maybe 3 more Supreme Court justices and probably appoint another 200 federal judge appointments. This will be a huge victory for the pro-life cause, for the pro-life movement, to protect religious liberty, to give freedom to Catholics and other Christians and people of goodwill, because the federal courts and the Supreme Court have in many ways become the most important branch of the government by the left. And so we're in a tipping point right now, guys, 2020. This is an election that really is going to decide whether we love this country and the freedom that it affords for our children and our grandchildren, or whether America is going to become a one-party socialist state like Venezuela. Because the Democrats, they want open borders for America, which really means no borders for America. That's what they want. They want anyone to just walk in so they can create millions of new voters for socialism. That's their plan for seizing permanent power in this country. Now, I'm going to admit to you, I'm not always happy with President Trump, the way sometimes he tweets and says things. But I'll tell you one thing, what I love about this president, he's a fighter. He loves America. He's fighting for me. He's fighting for my family. And he's fighting for the Catholic faith.
I'm with you,
and that's why they hate him. And that's why they hate him. So, Joe, what did you have anything else for Jesse, Joe?
Well, basically, he touched on it briefly. He talked about like some of his flaws. Like sometimes he says things, as Catholics, you may say like, and you hear it all the time in people, I don't like the way he talks. And I think the point that Jesse has made on his radio show out in California, and for all our listeners, please catch it. It's Virgin Most Powerful Radio out in California, West Covina. Terry and Jesse do a great job. You've said, like, Donald Trump is not the Messiah. Jesus Christ is. I'm not voting for my pastor. I'm voting for my president. He is not perfect. Well, guess what? None of us are. But there is no question, without a doubt, that he is the best option for this country and for all Catholics.
Particularly, Joe, I mean, again, there's such a stark contrast because you look at where the Democrat Party has gone, where they have positioned themselves. So I agree with you 1,000%. Even if you're lukewarm on Donald Trump, you got to look at the other side and say, but I can't vote for that. Not if you're sane. Sorry. I know people will get turned off by that. Not if you're sane. In other words, because they are just so far off the deep end. That's the truth.
Let me give you one last analogy. I tell people this is the way I see politics. We got two parties. Here's the football field, okay? What do we want to do in football? We want to make a touchdown. You got two parties out there. Every time a Republican's in office, we gain a little bit of yardage. 3 yards, 5 yards, 10 yards, 6 yards. We gain yardage. And I mean for the pro-life cause, for the gospel of life, for religious liberty. When a Democrat is in office, we go backwards for a loss of yardage. Every single time they take the reins of power. That's the best way I can explain it. Again, there are no perfect candidates because the only perfect candidates would be Jesus and Mary. They're not running for office. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and she's the Queen of Heaven. They're not running for office. So we have to pick from flawed men. I'm a flawed man. The Pope's a flawed man. You guys are flawed men. Terry's a flawed man. We have to pick from flawed men, but we want to pick, as Father Pavone says, we want to look at, realistically, at the person or their party that's going to leave us alone. We're not asking them to advance the Catholic faith and evangelize. Just leave us alone. Don't force Marxist, cultural relativism upon us. Let me raise my family the way we see fit. Let me go to church. Don't fill my kids with propaganda. We want to vote for the person or the party that's going to allow us as Catholics to live our faith. And let me tell you, this is the man right here.
Amen, brother. All right, so Jesse, we want to thank you for joining us. And Joe and I at the front line with Joe and Joe. It was a very, very important conversation to have. And Jesse, real quick, tell everybody where they could get the book, A Catholic Vote for Trump. Where could they get it?
Yeah, get the book. Go to tanbooks.com, tanbooks.com, and get the book. Or you can go to Amazon as well. I think it's being sold also by Target. But I prefer support a Catholic publisher. Go to tanbooks.com. And inform yourself. It's a quick read. It's short and pithy.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that about Tan Books. I actually got it on Amazon, but I'll remember from now on to order from Tan Books. And thank you again, Jesse, for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please remember, all you good people out there, to follow Joe and I on Facebook and YouTube at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please share this video with your friends when it comes out. But it's first going to be premiering on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, and the live chat room, the only social media out there where it's actually socializing in, is online at crusadechannel.com/chat. And remember that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll see you next time. And once more, dear friends, we are going into the breach. Oh, you're Catholic? Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe. You acted like an American. Okay, now there's a number of different things that have to be done in this country to change the culture, which will in turn change the politics.
And the culture's a swamp. Because that is not a Catholic teaching.
Right.
And the cafeteria is closed, my friend.
Yeah. Joe Pasillo, joined as always by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear friends, we are going into the breach. He tells the truth, just like we do at the front line with Joe and Joe on Sunday nights, 8 o'clock, Facebook Live. We got a great show for you tonight because, as we always say, the left is teeing it up for us, and we're Barry Bonds standing at home plate, ready to knock their lies right into San Francisco Bay.